Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
Now, last episode we talked about the Queen going back to work after her holidays, and this time it is Kate's turn.
Kate Middleton is back to work after a break of 10 weeks.
That's incredible.
Last time we saw Kate, she was at a football match in July, working. And this week, she was out visiting the RAF Bryce Norton, which is an air base that's northwest of London. And she was speaking with those involved in Operation Pitting, which saw more than 15,000 people, including about 2,200 children, airlifted out of Kabul during August.
We were initially a little bit sceptical, thinking who would be really excited to meet Kate after going through all of that, but it does seem like some of the people who met her were really delighted.
Yeah, I saw one of the officers, Wing Commander Calvin Bailey, said that people want to tell their story. They want to say, this is hard, I did this. This is what I feel proud about, and she gave that to them today. They were just so important, and so for us, there's a lot of necessary catharsis. We need to share our stories and we need to get them out, and that's what the media allows us to kind of do, because it means for them, their parents will see them on the news tonight and hear their stories. It was priceless. That was kind of a reminder to me, because I was sort of thinking like, God, what's Kate gonna do? But, you know, for a lot of people, she is considered a sort of representative for the British public, so for her to go there and do that for all those people, I thought was a nice thing.
Yeah, and it's like we've said before that, you know, one of the best things that the royals can do is serve as an amplifier for other people's stories. And that's very much what Kate did at this event. This Wing Commander, Calvin Bailey, also described how Kate was interested in discussions about people, and added that she wanted to know about the experience down the back of the plane, trying to picture what 460 people was like down there, what state they were in, how did they feel, talking about children. It seemed to connect to her. Being able to tap into the right thing is an art. So it seems like she acquitted herself very well in these conversations as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking, like, before when we've seen Kate at these kind of military engagements, it's actually usually Will that's sort of taking the lead, because obviously his background, and it's sort of interesting to me that he wasn't there and this was just a Kate solo event. But like you're saying, she put herself well. And you mentioned talking about children. She noted that her kids are very interested in aircraft.
Which I'm sure they are. I mean, we know that they have fueled George's interest in military history, and I'm sure that includes a lot of aircraft. But I think some royal watchers were annoyed that this note about the Cambridge kids was what dominated some of the headlines about the event, which, I mean, I guess I understand, but also, you know, that's the new bit of information about the royal family that came out of this event, right?
Yeah, I feel like there's only so many times you can say Kate was very moved to hear people's stories.
Exactly. Like, it is her job to be moved by these people's stories in this kind of situation, so...
And it sounds like she was that too, according to this guy. Anyway, fashion-wise, Kate wore all British brands to this engagement, including a new to us, Reese double-breasted blazer, cream-coloured, with a white blouse from Goat that we've seen before, and those mysterious wide navy trousers she's worn a few times that are maybe from Jigsaw.
She doesn't want anyone to know where she got them. They're all for her.
But, you know, it's definitely a move away from all those, like, skinny jeans and, like, the really skinny trousers that she wore for so many years.
Yeah.
And I think it does look a little fresher and a bit more modern. And I thought it was like a little bit more casual than what we, you know, usually if you think of Kate meeting like members of the military, it's like, oh, coat, dress, and probably like a fascinator or something.
And like, if she can get away with it, she'll have epaulets.
Or nipple tassels. But she also had this little handbag from another British company that was also cream coloured, and that was new. And kind of reminded me a little bit of the Queen with her little handbags.
Yeah.
That was maybe like a nod to the Queen's signature style.
Yeah, it was a pretty fresh look, but it didn't exactly rock my world. Unlike the main story of this week, which is obviously the continuation of the roller coaster ride that is Virginia Roberts Giuffre's civil suit against Prince Andrew.
Yeah, because last episode we were under the impression that Prince Andrew was basically in hiding to avoid being served with the legal papers that would allow Virginia's case against him to go ahead. This is, as we were saying before, the civil suit in which she accuses Andrew of rape in the first degree, sexual battery and sexual abuse. These are allegations, as we said before, that Andrew has always denied.
But then a few days later, after our episode had come out, Virginia's team announced that they had actually served him with the papers towards the end of August. They said security had initially refused to accept them, but then received them the following day.
Yeah, we were obviously thrilled about this news, but it didn't end there because Andrew's team decided to contest it in a pre-trial hearing. And I thought Toni, the royal reporter for The Telegraph, had a very interesting piece in her newsletter for The Telegraph this week, going into more detail about Andrew's legal team and their strategy. And she noted that Andrew has hired an American lawyer called Andrew Brettler to fight Virginia's claims. And, previously his London-based lawyers had planned to really stonewall the proceedings and had no intention of taking part in the pre-trial hearing. Basically just sort of hoped it would go away, I guess.
Yeah.
But this new American guy, Andrew Brettler, has warned them it would do them no favours to ignore the judge's order.
So this really raises questions about what their tactics are going to be going forward. The London team has advocated a safer approach, trying to get the case dropped on technicalities, which is something that Brettler raised in this pre-trial hearing, arguing that the paperwork wasn't properly served to Andrew, and raising the topic of a secret settlement agreement that Virginia apparently made with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in 2009. Apparently in this settlement, she vowed not to take further action against Epstein or his associates.
Yeah, and I hadn't heard this part before, but this settlement agreement, which remains sealed, is said to have prompted the dismissal last month, by consent, of Virginia's claim against the former Epstein lawyer Alan Dershowitz. We've talked about him before on the podcast. But the new American lawyer Brettler is now pushing for that statement to be made available to him so that he could similarly release Andrew from potential liability. But for that to happen, Andrew would have to participate in the civil trial, i.e. Andrew would have to be served with the papers that he has been reportedly avoiding.
And which the lawyers are arguing he hasn't been served with properly. But Virginia's lawyer, David Boyes, has said that this is a mischaracterization of the settlement agreement that is sealed. And with regards to serving Andrew, he said that they had delivered the papers to his last known address and also sent them by royal mail, which I thought was so good. Such a funny thing to say. And true.
I thought it was notable that in that Telegraph newsletter, Toni pointed out that a case dropped on legal technicalities isn't exactly a ringing endorsement for Andrew. It's not clearing him of being a paedophile, a claim that he denies. And, people would continue to believe there's no smoke without fire. So she said this is why some people within Andrew's camp believe that he should call Virginia's bluff and challenge her claims in court. That if he's so confident that he cannot recall even meeting his accuser, let alone sleeping with her, and that her testimony contains significant inconsistencies, then why not take her on?
I wonder. But there was some kind of good news that came out of all this mess. And that was that the UK's High Court has agreed to serve the papers to Andrew. So this request was made under the Hague Service Convention, which is a convention that governs requests between countries for evidence in these kind of civil or commercial matters. And although the High Court initially refused, on being given further information by Virginia's team, they will now step in if necessary, i.e. if Andrew continues to hide.
Yeah, and now Andrew's lawyers have a week to challenge this decision. But all the same, I think it can be considered a win for Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talked about last episode was that there's a possibility that the UK High Court could rule that Andrew wouldn't have to pay this $14 million damage bill that is possible if Virginia wins. we obviously know nothing about legal matters at all, but could this be an early indication either of the strength of Virginia's case with this additional information that they provided to the UK High Court, or is it just more an indication of a lack of sympathy for Andrew on behalf of the UK High Court? We don't know. We can't tell you because we don't really know anything about these matters.
That's just Tom's completely baseless speculation.
But it does make you wonder. Anyway, the fact that the case will now go ahead is hopefully terrible for Andrew.
Yeah, and hopefully, as we've said before, for the Queen too.
Yeah.
And could really open people's eyes to her role in this. And, you know, it could be the case that her lasting legacy will be supporting her very creepy, embarrassing son as he tries to evade charges of sexual assault.
Which is not a great look.
We were talking there about sealed documents, Tom. Something else that has been sealed is the will of Prince Philip, which the High Court ruled this week will remain a secret for 90 years.
Oh my god, they fucking love doing this. It's a royal convention to ask the courts to seal a family member's will after their death, which is by the way, not something that is available to normal members of the public. But this is what happened with the Queen Mum and Princess Margaret. But it didn't happen with Diana due to what the lawyer for her estate described as great public interest.
I mean, I would certainly have a great interest in reading Philip's will. And it actually makes me very frustrated that I won't be alive when it's unsealed.
Yeah.
But, Tom, why is it being kept sealed? To maintain the dignity of the sovereign and close members of her family, apparently.
This is the dignity of a woman who's had Andrew hiding in her house for part of the summer. It does make you think, did Will and Harry's dignity not really matter when Diana's will was revealed?
Yeah, or like, what do they think Prince Philip's will contains that could harm the dignity of the Queen?
Cue massive speculation.
Yeah, so much talk this week about mistresses, possible love children. I think it's probably something less salacious, but fascinating to you and I that the royals don't pay inheritance tax.
Yeah, I was thinking if the full sum of money that he was leaving to people was made public, potentially people could calculate how much the royals should be paying in inheritance tax and therefore how much they owe us as taxpayers.
Yeah, because it was kind of a big story back when the Queen Mum died that the Queen was able to use this loophole to get out of paying what would have been £20 million in inheritance tax on what she received in her will, and that would have been £33 million in today's money.
Jesus.
So I don't know what Philip's situation is, but if it's, you know, even
anything approaching that, it's a travesty. But I do think it would be very interesting to find out how much he left to Penny Brabourne, his longtime companion.
Speaking, though, of funny business with money, there have been stories for a while now about financial irregularities with regards to Prince Charles and Prince Charles's relatives. There was one we mentioned on the podcast about Camilla Parker Bowles' nephew, Ben Elliott, the Tory party chairman, who was accused of making money from his royal connections, arranging a dinner meeting with Charles for a wealthy client of his concierge company that I had felt was pretty good value at £15,000.
But the one that's really blown up, though, is a cash for honours scandal involving Charles's charity, the Prince's Foundation, and his longtime aide and former valet, Michael Fawcett, and a Saudi businessman. So the Sunday Times and the Mail on Sunday reported that Michael Fawcett had helped support the campaign for Dr. Mahfouz Murray Mubarak bin Mahfouz to obtain royal honours and a British citizenship in exchange for donations to royal charities. And that includes the Prince's Foundation. So he gave more than £1.5 million towards restoration projects that Charles was involved in. And then Charles was photographed presenting him with an honorary CBE, which is the highest ranking Order of the British Empire award. And it was at a private ceremony in Buckingham Palace in 2016.
Yeah, a private ceremony, which is very unusual when they hand out these honours. There's always a big fuss about it. But this, you know, it wasn't recorded in the court circular. So already a little bit of fishiness there. The following year, Michael Fawcett wrote to him saying, in light of the ongoing and most recent generosity of His Excellency, I am happy to confirm to you in confidence that we are willing and happy to support and contribute to the application for citizenship. He also said, I can further confirm that we are willing to make an application to increase His Excellency's honour from honorary CBE to that of KBE in accordance with Her Majesty's Honours Committee. Is that a knighthood?
Yeah, so CBE is the highest you can go without being called Sir or Dame, and then KBE is a step up from that, so yeah, he's a Sir. But the Times has also claimed that Charles was 100% behind the offer to help the billionaire with his application for British citizenship. And we should just note that Mahfouz has given a lot of money to the charitable trust that runs Charles's properties. He has a whole wood named after him at the Castle of May, which is yet another one of Charles's properties. And that's following a £370,000 donation.
Ooh.
But I mean, he did also get 6 benches around the property, which all bear the names of him and his family.
That's so weird.
I know. I don't understand why he would spend that much money, but I guess eventually you get to be called Sir.
Do you think Prince George is like, who's that? When he's walking around.
Yeah.
This story prompted high-level talks at Clarence House and Buckingham Palace because there were concerns Charles could be dragged into it.
Dodoy?
A palace source told Harper's Bazaar, this is very bad.
I thought that was such a funny quote. But an insider also added in this Harper's Bazaar piece, this could potentially be very damaging for the Prince of Wales. There are most definitely concerns about how serious this could get.
Yeah, and I think it sort of hit home for me when I saw that Michael Fawcett had resigned or temporarily resigned from his position as CEO of the foundation after the story broke.
It's always temporary with him, though.
We've talked about him a few times. In 2001, a black former secretary to Prince Charles claimed that Fawcett had racially abused her. He called her a fucking N-word typist, you may remember from that episode we talked about. And as far as we're aware, he faced no repercussions.
And in 2003, he resigned from Charles's team when an official inquiry was launched after reports claimed that he had sold unwanted royal gifts. He was cleared of financial misconduct, but seems like he's never that far away from some of these kind of shady deals. And it makes me wonder, why has he retained such esteemed positions?
Especially because I saw that after they got divorced, Princess Diana had the locks changed at Kensington Palace so that he couldn't come in anymore. So she clearly knew what was up with this guy. But Charles apparently once said, I can manage without just about anyone except Michael. I wonder how Camilla feels about this guy.
But it wasn't just kind of one of these royal stories about vague, shady behaviour. Charles and Fawcett have been reported to the Metropolitan Police at least twice around this. Once is by Republic, the organisation that campaigns for the abolition of the monarchy and for an elected head of state. They contacted Scotland Yard and reported them on suspicion of breaching the Honours Prevention of Abuses Act of 1925.
They were also reported by Norman Baker, the former Liberal Democrat MP and author of books on royal finances. We talk about him a lot.
But Clarence House released a statement saying that the Prince of Wales has no knowledge of the alleged offer of honours or British citizenship on the basis of donation to his charities and fully supports the investigation now underway by the Prince's Foundation.
Norman Baker sort of countered this in an interview on Talk Radio, saying that Fawcett was the closest person to Charles other than Camilla. He said, the idea that Michael Fawcett would write letters or undertake policies in this kind of rogue operation without Prince Charles knowing is just with the fairies. Absolutely Prince Charles knows what's going on.
Like, there's no way you are one of Charles's most trusted people for decades while you're doing stuff without his blessing. Doesn't make sense to me. But it does seem like there are others jumping ship as well. The chairman of the Prince's Foundation, Douglas Connell, has also resigned. He expressed concerns over the reports that the organisation accepted a 6-figure sum from a Russian donor, Dmitry Leus. So this is a different dodgy deal.
Yeah, in this case, Charles allegedly wrote a letter thanking this Russian businessman for his offer of more than £500,000 to the Princess Foundation last year and suggested they could meet when the pandemic was over. This is very recent.
Yeah, apparently the charity initially received £100,000, but the total sum was reportedly rejected by its ethics committee due to concerns about where the money came from. And this is according to the Sunday Times.
Yeah, so the Scottish charity regulator has launched an investigation into this. But that's not all.
Chris Martin, an executive director of the charity, has also temporarily stepped aside. So I just wonder how many bodies are going to be thrown onto the sword to protect Charles.
The sword?
The sword that is investigations into the Princess Foundation. There are lots of funny tweets about Charles distancing himself from the Princess Foundation. Like loads of screenshots of the big photo collage on the website that makes up an image of Charles. And like all the lines in really big fonts saying how it's inspired by Charles's philosophy.
I think when your charity work is so clearly based on and fueled by your own sense of self-importance, it becomes very hard to convincingly distance yourself from this kind of scandal.
Yeah, definitely.
On top of that, the Sunday Times had a front page story today about Charles having met the fixer at the centre of this Cash for Honour scandal 9 times.
That's a lot of explaining.
I know. It suggests he's either like alarmingly oblivious that he could meet someone 9 times and have no clue what this guy was up to, or he had some inkling of the bargain he was getting into. And I think either way, it raises very serious questions about Charles's judgment. And I think he's going to have a hard time distancing himself from that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think maybe the Queen does as well, because she seems to have been running interference a lot recently.
Two intriguing instances of this week. One in People magazine, where a former pipe major to the Queen, Scott Methven, spoke about how she was so caring and looked after his children while his wife was suffering with cancer, and also how she has just the best banter and killer one-liners.
I mean, this piece does also then go on to say that it was the staff that looked after his kids, even though it tries to make it sound like it was the Queen personally doing it.
I know, but it's just such a clear example of, like, you know, we never hear these kind of stories without approval coming directly from the top. You can't just go out and share this. You can't, like, blab about this kind of thing unless you have been permitted or perhaps encouraged. Yeah,
there was like a line towards the end of the piece where the Piper was talking about how the royals actually still keep in touch now and then, and just the other week he got contacted by someone. So I was wondering if there was a prompt there. But the other story, which I'm sure you're all aware of if you're listening to this, but recently the Queen's first black Lord Lieutenant for Greater London, Kenneth Olisa, spoke out about the royal family's support for Black Lives Matter.
Yes, and he was asked whether the royal families support Black Lives Matter, and he said, "The answer is easily yes. I have discussed with the royal household this whole issue of race, particularly in the last 12 months since the George Floyd incident. It's a hot conversation topic. The question is, what more can we do to bind society to remove these barriers? They care passionately about making this one nation bound by the same values."
I mean, they're certainly passionate about making it one nation.
They're so passionate they can't even say the words Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
But they'll send out one of their staff members, one of their black staff members, to say what none of the senior working royals will, and what some of them have actually denounced.
We're looking at you, Mike Tyndall.
Yeah.
Like, even this statement uses the phrase "the issue of race" rather than "the issue of racism," which is very telling.
And focuses on the George Floyd incident as if this is a US-specific issue rather than something that's rife in the UK and within the fucking royal family.
It's so little and it's so late that it would be pretty much meaningless even if it didn't come at the precise moment that two of her sons were embroiled in very public scandals.
Yeah, and it makes it sound like this poor fucking guy had to educate the royal family on the whole issue of race when that's not his fucking job.
Yeah.
The whole issue of race. It's such like walking on eggshells type language, which I would imagine he was instructed to use.
Yeah, and like you say, like this is not his job. They're just saying you're black, so you should be the one to say it, which is very typical of these kind of white people in these kind of positions, I think.
Yeah, and it just makes me think this is absolutely the kind of thing that they have thought up to appease white people and followers of the royal family, fans of the royal family who might think this is some indication of progress or a step forward.
Yeah.
And that's just not fucking good enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't actually criticise anything about what's going on in this country whatsoever. Like you said, it focuses on America when all's said and done. But there was a slightly smaller story, but it was still interesting, about the Queen, that she is expected to split her time next year between Windsor and Buckingham Palace. The royal editor at the Sunday Times, Roy Anika, spoke to True Royalty TV, saying, "I think the plan is for her to stay at Windsor. I expect we'll see more activity with her back at Buckingham Palace as we approach the Platinum Jubilee next year. I think she will resume residence again at Buckingham Palace in order to justify the £369 million refurb. Otherwise, many people would think, what's the point of the refurb?"
Otherwise.
Yeah, but the fact that she might be popping into the office a couple of times next year actually really puts my mind at ease.
I think it seems like the Queen or possibly her team are anticipating some kind of backlash. You know, there has been resistance to the use of this money for a few years now, but especially right now in the pandemic, I think people possibly will start to feel seriously pissed off about this £369 million.
I mean, especially as the government recently announced that one of the ways they're going to try and fund the NHS after, you know, this very difficult year and a half, 2 years for them, is by increasing the national insurance charge, which will massively affect people in work, especially those at lower tax brackets, whilst not really affecting wealthy people who get income from properties.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of anger about this. And honestly, if the Queen or her team think that this kind of vague platitude is going to put people at ease, they must be pretty stupid.
I want to talk about the Queen versus Michael D.
You've been waiting to talk about this your whole life, I feel.
Well, I was really shocked by the coverage this week of the Irish president, Michael D. Higgins, being invited to a church service in October in County Armagh to mark the partition of Ireland and the formation of Northern Ireland 100 years ago, at which the Queen would be in attendance as head of the Anglican Church. And Michael D declined this invitation. He pointed out that the event wasn't politically neutral and that he felt it wouldn't be appropriate for him to attend. And people lost their damn minds.
As Justine McCarthy explained in the Sunday Times, as the guardian of the Constitution, which explicitly aspires to reunification, inviting Higgins to such an event was like inviting the juiciest turkey in the farmyard to a meal in honour of Christmas.
She also said if Higgins was to attend the church service in Armagh, he would be associating not only himself but all the people of Ireland with the act of dividing this island. And I think, you know, maybe some people are maybe not aware of all the sensitivities around this, and, you know, it is a very difficult balancing act for somebody like Michael D. But, like, this kind of thing would always be politically sensitive, but at the moment, especially so because of the ongoing debate around a border poll. A poll by The Observer newspaper last month found that 2/3 of voters in Northern Ireland want a vote on staying in the UK post-Brexit. And since Brexit, there's been a lot more discussion about reunification.
Especially with these like contentious talks about updating the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is the deal agreed by the UK and the EU to prevent a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic post-Brexit.
Yet, you know, despite all this, Higgins has been accused of snubbing the Queen.
It's so stupid. So many people have been criticising him, and like this includes the head of the Democratic Unionist Party, Jeffrey Donaldson. Michael D. Higgins has said he was not snubbing anyone and described the criticism, "It's a bit much, to be frank with you. I've gone up to Northern Ireland to take part in events. There often has not been a great deal of traffic down from the DUP people who are criticising me now." I mean, basically all of the lines I've seen quoted from Michael D. around this are just gems. He's like, I've always liked him, but he just seemed especially cool this last week.
And he has spoken how he's never had any problem in going to events with the Queen and doing events related to reconciliation and things like that. It's not like he is against unionists or anything like that. But I think it's important for him as president to recognise that for a lot of people in Ireland, the partition is a moment of great tragedy in Irish history. And Michael D. Higgins was also a poet. He is a poet. And obviously words are very important to him.
Yeah.
And the DUP rather carelessly referred to Higgins as the President of the Republic of Ireland. And Higgins very patiently explained there is no such country as the Republic of Ireland. It's just Ireland.
Oh, I just love him.
But anyway, in this sort of war of words between Michael D. and the Queen, goes without saying we're on Michael D's side.
Of course. But I think the time has come for our long-promised book club episode.
The moment you've all been waiting for. We have to talk about Fergie's debut adult fiction novel.
This is, of course, Her Heart for a Compass.
Co-written by Fergie and Margaret Kay. We will note at this point, we're going to spoil the whole book from this moment on. So if you don't want to be spoiled for whatever reason, you can stop.
We're going to put a load of timestamps in the episode notes because we're also going to talk about a film called Diana and Me and also the Netflix series Young Royals. So you'll be able to skip to those if for some reason you don't want to know what happens in the end of Fergie's book.
But before you go, I would say don't read this book. Just listen to us. We've read it, so you don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing we should note is that Fergie is described at the beginning of this book as daughter-in-law of the Queen.
The first thing they say about her is that she's daughter-in-law of the Queen.
Which is not true.
Yeah, and then they go on to say she is the former wife or the ex-wife or whatever of Prince Andrew. Surely then she would also be the former or ex-daughter-in-law of the Queen.
Yeah, if you divorce the man, you divorce the mother. As I always say. But this book is inspired loosely by the life of Lady Margaret Montague Douglas Scott, who was the second daughter of Walter, the 5th Duke of Buccleuch, and his wife Charlotte, who were Fergie's great-great-great-grandparents.
So I thought we could talk a little bit about the plot of this book.
Yeah.
This book is enormous, by the way. It's over 500 pages.
And it really doesn't need to be.
We're just going to give you the sort of top line events. But as it begins, Margaret is about to be engaged to Lord Ponsonby, who is a friend of her father's, who is introduced to us as a sort of decrepit Mr. Burns figure. But we later learn he's actually 35.
I was shocked.
Margaret is 19, I think, so I guess she'd see it very differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a surprising discovery. Anyway, her father, the Duke, is very keen on this marriage because, as he puts it, our estates have lots of sheep. He has woolen mills. In more ways than one, it will be a marriage made in heaven. Her dad's a total asshole.
Yeah.
By the way.
Absolute asshole. But Margaret, I'm sure we don't need to tell you, has no time for the marriage conventions of her age.
No way.
She will not be led by these men because her heart is her compass. And she also has a rebellious little voice in her head that forever accompanies her. And we are constantly reminded about this, like every few pages.
Yeah. So as the book is opening, she is at a ball where her engagement is going to be announced, and she decides to run away from the ball. And a couple of things happen. She is found by Donald Cameron of Lochiel, who is also a friend of her dad's. So I immediately wrote him off thinking he was like 60, but he's only 30. And this is the start of a long, long, long friendship and eventual marriage.
Her dad has a lot of young friends, young male friends.
She also meets the first poor person she's ever met in her life.
Yeah, this is a man called Fraser Scott, who's a soldier who had lost his legs in the Crimea War, and he opens her eyes to the realities of working class life in Scotland at this time. And these kind of two things are a catalyst for the rest of the book. So she strikes up this long correspondence and friendship with Donald, and she gets really into charity work.
Yeah, and this is real charity work, guys.
Yeah, as she tells her friend, Queen Victoria's daughter, Louise, it's not about doing good, Louise. It's about learning what real life is like. It's about being part of something and feeling useful.
Just to do like a quick summary of the plot. So, after the engagement is foiled, she's exiled to one of her family's properties in Scotland, and she spends Christmas alone for the first time, which I did feel quite sad for her at that point. Like, her family are fucking monsters.
Yeah, they're total assholes at this point. She then agrees to give Ponsonby another chance to propose, and that she's going to live by her father's rules. And she ends up living in London for a while, where she helps out a vicar in Lambeth called Father Sebastian.
Hot priest.
Yeah.
Someone's been watching Fleabag.
Well, you say hot priest, but he is, like all of her possible romantic encounters, not conventionally handsome.
Yeah, I learned early on this is the flag post to indicate love interest. And Sebastian ultimately proposes to her around the same time as Ponsonby is going to, but she cannot ignore the compass of her heart, which calls her to adventure, not marriage.
So after hanging around long enough to be a bridesmaid at the royal wedding of one of Queen Victoria's other daughters, not her friend Louise, she is once again banished by her father, who now won't be in the same country as her, but he will provide her with an allowance, which means that her life is still very comfortable. But she goes to Ireland, where she stays with Lady Julia at Power's Court House, which is a very big, very famous house in Ireland.
Yeah, in Wicklow. And I think it was at the 100-point mark, I was like, we can't stop reading before she goes to Ireland, because we've got to find out what Fergie in Ireland is like.
Yeah.
And I've been to Paris Court a few times. Very beautiful waterfall, very beautiful gardens, very big Avoca shop there. Would highly recommend it. But I think multiple times in this book, when she goes basically anywhere, it becomes very apparent that this book was written in lockdown, and that her researchers were sending her passages copied and pasted from Wikipedia that are just dumped in, where she describes various architectural details, or when she goes to Dublin and she describes Merrion Square. And
yeah, it's like a walking tour from Google Maps or something.
It's so tedious.
Yeah. So it's while she's in Ireland with Julia that she spends another Christmas without her family, which is, you know, again, very sad. But this time Donald turns up and proposes to her. They kiss, but she turns down his offer of marriage.
Yet again, the compass of her heart is pointing her elsewhere.
As is, it would seem, Julia's husband's, because it's implied that he is gay. They described him as someone who should be a confirmed bachelor and shouldn't have married.
And his whole character is obsessed with stag-related artworks.
So virile and manly.
But I was a bit confused about this, because his younger brother comes to visit, and he is also not conventionally handsome, so my love interest alarm was going off. But he also seemed possibly queer-coded to me, and seemed to be sort of fulfilling the role of the, you know, stereotypical gay best friend. Yeah. So I wasn't sure. 2 gay bros maybe, 2 queer bros maybe, but the whole point of this guy is that he gives Margaret the idea to go to America.
And she does head off to America, but not before she has done some good in Dublin, the continuation of her charity work. She writes her first book of short stories for children, Tall Tales and Wagging Tails. which is distributed to poor kids in Dublin. But she heads off to New York with a new travelling companion called Marion. And once she's there, she almost immediately gets snapped up as a writer for 2 magazines, including a very young Harper's Bazaar.
Yeah, these 2 editors are like fighting over her, desperate to get her to write for them. And she agrees to write for both of them, producing the most boring columns imaginable.
I think one of my favourites was The Day I Got on a Bus.
They include them almost in full, I think, and they are absolutely mind-numbing. And some of them are like really earnest diatribes on like charity and poverty and things like that, which just you cannot imagine Harper's Bazaar or anyone else ever publishing.
Yeah, so moralising. But when she's not being a fantastic journalist, she also gets her book republished in the States and sets up her charity, The Sanctuary, in the 5 Points neighborhood of New York.
Yeah, and in every city she goes to, we have this repeated scenario where she decides to scorn the posh society and instead, you know, get to the grit of a city and go to the poor neighborhoods and does this kind of slum tourism.
Yeah. And this is all like rendered in Fergie's mind as like totally worthy and no problem with her at all, because she does this impeccable and incredibly worthy charity work.
Almost like Princess Diana or something.
Oh, But she does all this while being wooed by yet another suitor.
Yet another unconventionally handsome, or as she puts it, neither classically handsome nor memorable, but genially attractive lawyer. Randolph Mueller.
So he is really rich, like Margaret, but he does loads of pro bono work, like Margaret. And they eventually kiss, but ultimately they remain just friends. He gets married and has a kid that he names after Margaret. He calls her Marguerite, which is also the name of the co-author of this book. And she then decides that she can go back to the UK because her income from her fabulous writing means that she doesn't need her father's allowance anymore.
Yeah, a bit of a Carrie Bradshaw about it.
Because we should say that her father had said if she ever steps foot on British soil again, he's going to stop giving her money.
But actually he doesn't really mind.
Yeah.
When she comes back.
He never, like, actually explicitly forgives her or gives her his blessing or anything. But she lives in Edinburgh and she opens more branches of the Sanctuary and she continues writing columns for American magazines and he never stops her money.
Yeah, and this whole time she's sort of been pining for this guy Donald who had proposed to her in Ireland. But she had been led to believe that he had gotten married. But then she goes to see him and finds out, actually, 9 years later, however long, he hasn't. And they kiss. They kiss, don't they, Tom?
They do kiss. They have a kind of passionate kiss, so passionate that he has to rearrange his kilt.
Oh, good God.
At which point I finally started to kind of pay attention.
Did you?
But then they immediately talk about how they're going to have to wait 2 years to get married, and he like launches into the logistics of all this. But you know, they talk about this 2-year period that they're going to have where they can't be married, they have to live apart, but Margaret makes it clear that they should be having sex during this time. But we never get to see any of this. The book just stops and skips to the wedding.
It skips to them having a baby.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. And I mean, the book doesn't end really suddenly.
Yeah, it's so abrupt after dragging and dragging and dragging on.
Yeah.
Skips over the most interesting part.
Yeah.
As she tends to do so many times. Like, there's so many passages where it's like, she was about to go spend the summer at this New York socialite's country house. And you're like, oh, that sounds good. And then it's like, as the summer ended, she returned back to the city. And you're like, what the fuck, Fergie? I don't want to hear about another bloody worthy charity visit.
They were probably just like, oh, there's not an actual Wikipedia page about this specific event, so it's too much work. But yeah, I mean, I think we should talk about our general feelings about the book. Like, it started off better than I expected.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot better, but it wasn't, like, unreadable. And I did expect there to be more of a romance element to it, given it's published by Mills and Boon.
Yeah.
And I guess I wasn't expecting like really steamy sex, but I thought there would at least be more passion than the like 3 kisses we got.
There was hardly anything. Like, there wasn't even like a fade to black sex scene. It was just the end of the book.
I thought people might be interested to hear an example. So, when she has her first kiss with the hot priest, Sebastian, only his touch made her skin tingle like this, made her feel like her corset was laced too tight, making it difficult to breathe. The taste of him, the softness of his mouth, the roughness of the cheek she lifted her hand to caress, the terrified delight of being so intimate with him shocked her. Then tentatively he moved his mouth on hers and she followed his lead, and her shock gave way to pleasure.
By contrast to this, though, her kisses with Randolph just made her want to be friends with him. So that was a bit of a dud. Like we mentioned, the stuff with Donald, he did have to adjust himself, but then the logistics talk really killed the mood massively. And I would say that rather than a romance, this is more of a tale of adventure that doesn't really have any obstacles for Margaret to overcome.
I think that was the most frustrating part for me, that it did feel at many points like a very specifically Fergie oriented fantasy. And to fulfill her wishes, like a wish fulfillment story for Fergie, and basically Fergie alone. Like, every time you think that there's going to be an obstacle, like, you think she's going to struggle with her weight, but then she just miraculously loses her appetite and decides she doesn't want to eat as much.
Yeah.
It just sort of fades away. And then you think she's going to struggle to be accepted by other people, but actually she's universally adored everywhere she goes on account of her bubbly personality and all of her wonderful charity work.
Yeah, like, you even think she's going to lose her family, but actually her exile brings her closer to her mother and sister. And like we said, after being banished by her father, in the end, he's basically fine.
Yeah, and you think she's going to struggle after being away from her family, but actually all of those boring columns she writes means she's raking it in.
Yeah.
And then possibly the most irritating to me is that she thinks Donald is married, so you think she's not gonna, I mean, I didn't really think he was gonna be married, but actually he's not, and he's been waiting for her the whole time, and they've just been pining for each other, and it all works out. Like, everything just works out so neatly.
Yeah. I mean, the fantasy does make sense, kind of, once you read the author's note at the end, which basically says they didn't know anything about Margaret. She's a total blank slate. They said, the scant information we've been able to glean about Margaret we have woven into this story. Her age, her appearance as a bridesmaid at this royal wedding, and the date of her marriage to Donald, which was comparatively late because she was 29 and he was 40. The remainder of Margaret's journey, save for these salient facts, is entirely fictional.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the interesting things as well for me, is that they imagine this friendship she has with Queen Victoria's daughter, Louise. And this author's note points out that there's no evidence that they had any kind of relationship whatsoever.
Yeah, she invents this relationship then, and I mean, Margaret has a really close relationship with the royal family of the time, and I was like struck by how much talk there is in the book about Queen Victoria being basically a boring, miserable cow. And like, it mainly comes from Victoria's own daughter, Louise.
Yeah, she says so many times like that Queen Victoria is determined to make everyone around her die of boredom. She's such tedious company. Louise is always doing these really catty impressions of her.
Yeah, I mean, it's unlikely that Fergie is using Victoria as a cipher for Queen Elizabeth, but it does make me wonder if she's hinting at how the real royals talk about their family members, like in particular, perhaps the Queen, and like maybe all the respect that's supposed to be afforded to her position isn't as forthcoming on a personal level. That was what it kind of made me think.
Yeah. I think also, you know, the fact that Queen Victoria is not alive means that she's probably a pretty safe punchline.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk a little bit about Margaret's relationship with Louise, because it's one that is dwelt on a lot in the book and does ultimately fall apart, because they start off very close, though Margaret is uninterested in following royal protocol. There's a bit where she touches Louise's hand in sympathy and calls her Lou, thus committing 2 social gaffes at once.
And it becomes really clear over the course of the book that Louise only cares about herself and how her friend makes her look. And she only really considers Margaret's banishment and exile from Britain in how it affects her rather than how Margaret might feel about it.
Yeah, and I was sort of thinking, like, why would Fergie decide to include this royal character and make her such a pretty, like, irredeemable bitch?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, was, you know, part of it based on Fergie's own experience, possibly with Diana, maybe? I mean, I do think this kind of egocentrism could be applied to any of the royals.
Yeah, but like it's well known, obviously, that Diana and Fergie had a close friendship that then broke apart. You know, the possibility that it was Diana who leaked Fergie's whereabouts ahead of those toe-sucking photos. Like, obviously something happened, and, you know, some kind of personality clash maybe.
And I can imagine, you know, Diana or another member of the royal family being very concerned with how Fergie's behaviour reflects on them.
Yeah.
After her marriage to Andrew ended.
Yeah, there was this bit in the book that, you know, it's when Margaret is spending her first Christmas by herself and her maid invites her to have dinner with the servants and Margaret declines. She says, you know, how it wouldn't be fair as it would ruin the servants' festivities. And it did remind me of the stories about Diana going into the kitchens at Kensington Palace. Like, obviously Diana was in a lot of pain, but it's still kind of overstepping an employer's bounds and asking for an kind of unpaid emotional labour on behalf of employees. And I was, you know, thinking, is that something that Fergie recognises and is kind of commenting on there? But that could well be all in my own mind because I read Tina Brown's book fairly recently.
I think that might be it, Tom.
Yeah.
I do think that the book, you know, although it really doesn't work as a novel, it does give some insight into Fergie and maybe how Fergie sees herself, because obviously Fergie identifies with Margaret a lot. We have this red-haired rebellious woman who loves telling stories to children, has these royal connections, and sees herself as having a great legacy of charitable contributions.
I mean, yeah, make no mistake, Margaret would definitely have a shit YouTube channel if she was alive now.
I did want to note that they go to great lengths to describe Margaret's red hair. Here are just some of the ways it's described: as a rebellious red mop, a sodden mass of rebellious curls, a scarlet flag, wild curls whipping around her face, and burnished autumn leaves.
It's so beautiful. So many ways to describe this red hair. And, I mean, Margaret is also not conventionally beautiful by the standards of her time, although she can be disguised as such by her mother. But instead, she has this sort of wild, unusual beauty that is just captivating to these unusual-looking men.
And when she does go to that Deb's ball and she's, you know, trussed up and she's indistinguishable from all the other women, she hates that.
Oh, she hates it.
Because she's unruly, Tom. And you know, she flops inelegantly down when she sits on the couch. She speaks vulgarly. She bursts into the room like a London bobby. I love the description so much.
That was so funny, that one.
And she has no discipline when it comes to the table until she conveniently does.
That is so funny. No discipline when it comes to the table. It sounds actually quite horrendous.
Like a dog.
But she is written by Fergie as a sort of feminist hero for the 21st century. Like, all of the things that are seen as flaws by characters in the book are things that we value today. But it makes for her as a fairly boring character because Fergie clearly doesn't want her to be unlikable in any way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, especially when you contrast her with the royal characters, like Fergie, you know, obviously has an understanding of selfish aristocratic behaviour, but she also, like, cannot avoid, using the way working class people treat Margaret as some sort of indicator of their character.
Yeah. Like, you have, as well as these various maids who want to be her friend / mother, you have this guy Fraser Scott, the soldier who'd lost his legs. He like looks after her, and notably, he doesn't sell the bracelet that falls off her wrist, which belongs to her mother, even though it's like they discuss at length about how he needs the money. And this is seen as a credit to him, as though if he had sold this bracelet, he would be a bad person and, you know, more perhaps deserving of poverty. So, like, the novel never really escapes that, I don't think.
No, and I think as well, one other similarity to the real life Fergie that we should point out is that Margaret is very ill-treated by the press, and that her heart for a compass repeatedly rages against the press. Multiple characters do. Margaret, her mother, Louise. Louise writes to Margaret, "The price of fame is relentless scrutiny. The newspapers love nothing better than to knock someone from her pedestal, especially when they put her there in the first place."
Yeah, there's just so many mentions of the evils of the press and the way they're so intrusive. And it includes like discussions of whether or not to engage with the press over matters of libel and things like that.
And it does happen so frequently in the first half of the book that when Margaret does go to New York and is immediately so delighted to take the job writing a column to start working for the press, that is like whiplash, because you're like, what the fuck? I thought, you know, the press was public enemy number one for you.
Yeah, I mean, she's essentially like a gossip columnist, except that I guess Fergie writing these incredibly banal columns on behalf of Margaret is maybe showing us what she thinks is good journalism or what these columns should be. But it's so boring. It really, to me, just hammered home the point that Fergie probably has no idea of how like the business of the media functions whatsoever.
No way.
But yeah, the idea of anyone buying the kind of columns that Margaret writes is like absolutely laughable.
So I would say this book is not worth reading. And I did think when I was reading it, like, I was dying for it to end, but I also thought, you know, Airheads listeners might enjoy hearing about it.
Yeah.
So I hope that wasn't really boring.
Yeah.
But she is working on a sequel.
Apparently this one's going to have lots of sex in it.
Don't get your hopes up.
Fergie told Town and Country magazine, "I decided I would remove bodice ripping from this book, number 1, but I'm now on book number 2 with Marguerite, and I've got a real bodice ripping coming for you. This is going to make 50 Shades of Grey just a walk in the park."
But then Marguerite Kay, the co-author, says she's teasing you. So...
yeah, probably not going to happen. But the writer also kind of sadly noted that Ferguson notes that her own life is now similarly chaste. There is no romance, she says. I was a bit bummed by that, but I guess it's better than hearing that she still sleeps with Andrew. Which would be a very funny thing, I guess, for them to include in Town and Country magazine.
Fergie said of the second book, "I can't reveal too much at this point, but it will be another period drama and will build on the world which I've created for this first book."
Build on the world that Wikipedia created for this first book. I mean, unfortunately for Fergie, I would say she's blown it. I do not intend to read a sequel.
No.
I mean, unless, you know, there's loads of sex in it. And then maybe I will. But we should move on to our next item, which is a film called Diana and Me.
Yes, I think we mentioned this months ago because I read a long piece in the Telegraph about this movie and how hard it was to find. It was never officially released in the UK, so we had to get this weird German DVD off eBay, and we were so excited to tell you guys about it. But basically, it's a romantic comedy that was filmed in 1996 as a tribute to the Princess Diana mania of the 90s, starring Toni Collette as an Australian woman named Diana Spencer, who is obsessed with the Princess Diana Spencer, and she wins a trip to London to meet her namesake, where she ends up falling in love with a paparazzi photographer called Rob, who is played by Dominic West.
And as you can imagine from this premise, the film is like a very eerie time capsule, because it was due to be released in September 1997, but of course on August 31st, everything changed. Diana died, and it only came out in Australia that Christmas and was screened on UK TV in 2000, so like 3 years later.
But yeah, the only way now is this German DVD.
Yeah, I feel like we're very lucky to have it.
But the way they sort of responded to Diana's death was that the filmmakers decided to shoot some extra footage of Toni Collette and Dominic West 18 months after the events of the film, leaving flowers in Diana's memory outside Kensington Palace. And these form the bookend scenes of the film and are like massively jarring compared to the rest of the tone, which is otherwise like very lighthearted, pretty zany.
Yeah, it was very odd. I mean, also Toni Collette's totally different hair.
Yeah, she has like the hair that she has in About a Boy.
yeah.
And it's sort of dressed like that as well. And it's just like she has a little opening voiceover as well about what Diana meant to her, and it's just so somber, which I guess felt more appropriate at the time, but is such a strange way to open your movie.
Yeah, I mean, especially when the subject of the film is what it is. Like, Toni Collette's character Diana is obsessed with celebrities and gossip magazines and Princess Diana, and Rob, Dominic West's character, his job is, basically stalking Diana day and night.
Yeah, so in the film, they meet at a garden party at Buckingham Palace where Diana, Toni Collette's character, and Rob are standing on this ladder and they fall over the barrier and then get arrested.
Yeah.
Because they think they're trying to like attack Princess Diana or something. And then over the next like 3 days, they keep bumping into each other, both of them sort of hunting down Diana across London. And they go on these sort of escapades that I guess are played for laughs. Like they climb up a tree trying to take pictures of Princess Diana at one of her friends' houses, and they sort of gleefully pursue her around London, even getting into a car chase at one point that is really uncomfortable to watch.
And they also like make jokes about her bulimia and things. Like, it basically forms like a checklist of all the things that people say were the like worst things that were done to Diana by the press.
Yeah, and I think, the film recognises that these aren't good behaviours, and Diana and Rob both do start to see the error of their ways as the film goes on. Like, I thought it was such a strange way of doing a romance, because the film's obviously trying to make some kind of point about the moral implications of tabloid culture. So we see Diana and Rob having these very heated debates where they say very cutting things to each other.
Yeah.
About their role in paparazzi culture and all that kind of thing. Like, they eventually break up when Rob takes pictures of a young Will and Harry, which he then attempts to barter with the princess so that Diana can meet her.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable, and like you said, like they're constantly talking about like being a producer and a consumer of this kind of tabloid culture. And when they reunite, it's then suggested that he's going to quit his job as a paparazzi, that he hasn't necessarily seen the error of his ways, but that he wants to see the error of his ways, which he believes he can do with Toni Collette as a, I guess, harrowing photojournalist instead of a paparazzi photographer.
Yeah, but there's a few scenes that really stood out to me. Like, there's one where Rob, she's like asking him about what he likes about this job, and he describes he's like almost having this like orgasmic moment describing the feeling of being the only one to get the shot of Diana, the shot that everyone wants.
Being the man.
Yeah, nobody has it but you, and you've captured her.
Yeah.
And, it's a really fascinating insight because, I feel like this movie, it seems to be made by an Australian team, and it looks like they were trying to replicate the success of Muriel's Wedding, although it's nowhere near as funny or as romantic as that film. But it just is in such poor taste now that you wonder, if Diana hadn't died, would people have enjoyed this kind of thing as a sort of commentary on their own obsession with Diana?
Yeah.
You know, obviously that casts such a shadow on it now, but it does give you a glimpse into how people were talking about Diana and the royals and celebrity. Like, there's a Kylie Minogue cameo in it as well. And a Bob Geldof cameo. There's like a bunch of like weird celebrities in it.
Jason Donovan.
Yeah. Lots of Australians. But yeah, it's just like such a fascinating like oddity, I think.
Yeah, and you know, like you're saying, it shows that people were talking about this kind of thing before she died. That it wasn't just like that tragic event brought it all to people's attention. Like, this was very much in the public consciousness.
Yeah, but I also think the movie's sort of trying to have it both ways by being like, isn't it funny that like we're like stalking Diana and like that's what's bringing us closer together, but then also being like, how dare you stalk Diana?
Yeah, and I guess her death really
underlines it.
Yeah, and just says like, actually, this is not the light-hearted subject that you think it is.
But yeah, I'm interested, given that Dominic West is going to be playing Prince Charles in the next season of The Crown, whether he will talk about this at all. Because in that piece in the Telegraph, I saw that the producer, the director, was talking about how when they were reshooting those scenes at Kensington Palace, everybody felt really icky about it. Toni Collette was really uncomfortable. And I just wonder, what does Dominic West think now?
I feel like he tries to think about it as little as possible. I think everyone involved in this was probably trying to pretend it didn't happen. But
I do think, you know, if you can find it, I think if you're interested in the royals or media culture, anything related to celebrity, it is a very unusual artifact reflecting the mood of the time. I want to move on to our third item, the Netflix show Young Royals. A 6-episode series that follows Prince Wilhelm, the second son of the Queen of Sweden, who enrolls in a fancy boarding school called Hillerska after being filmed in a drunken fight. That seems to be this like really big scandal that didn't really seem that scandalous to me.
Yeah, it didn't seem like in the UK that it would lead up to like changing schools and stuff. But this is a fictional version of the Swedish royals. In real life, they are King Carl, Queen Sylvia, and their children Victoria, Carl, and Madeline, plus their families. And like the UK, Sweden is a constitutional monarchy that receives funds from the government. Although from what I can tell, they cost the Swedish people about half of what we pay in the UK per person, or a bit less.
Doesn't make it okay.
Oh, no, not at all. But a little bit of context, because I didn't really know anything about the Swedish royals when I was actually watching this.
Me neither. But at this school, Willem meets Simon, who is a non-boarding student who's there on a scholarship. And he's also an anti-monarchist socialist.
So he and his sister Sarah live at home with their mum, who's a Latina immigrant, and they are treated really badly in general by the crowd of kids at this school, in particular by the series' main antagonist, August. So
Willem's older brother is the Crown Prince Eric, and he's a sort of golden boy and everybody loves him, and he gets on very well with August, who's I think like a cousin, some sort of distant cousin of the royal family. And when Eric brings Willem to school, he is entrusting him in the hands of August, but August is a huge fucking asshole.
Yeah, really massive asshole. But he's just the kind of leader in a whole group of assholes, really, at this very fancy school. Sarah, Simon's sister, who's on the autistic spectrum, she really wants to fit in with these rich kids. And in particular, she befriends a girl called Felice, whose horse she takes care of at the school stables, because that is the kind of school it is. They have their own stables. But you see, like, over the course of the series that Sarah does a whole load of things to try and fit in with these kids that are kind of morally questionable.
Yeah, and there's a sort of love triangle thing going on where Felice has a big crush on Will, but Will has
a big crush.
Will's attentions are focused elsewhere because the big secret, the central plotline of the story is Will and Simon's burgeoning romance.
It's a really cute relationship, and I really loved like the part of it where Wilhelm goes on this like illicit trip into town. He breaks out of the school to go and see Simon, and he has to work out how to use the bus for the first time. Like, normally I'm a bit like skeptical of like things that show royals having to do normal things, and it's like, but there's something really charming about Will, I think, because he's the second son and kind of like has been left to his own devices.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with Simon as well, the show takes the time to demonstrate how both Will and Simon feel like outsiders, but for very different reasons, obviously. And also both of them are mistreated by August, that he kind of uses both of them in different ways, with Will for its status and money, and with Simon for access to drugs and alcohol. But the show kind of, you know, has this very posh school with all its various ceremonies and rituals and secret societies and all that kind of stuff. But then mid-season, it takes a very shocking turn when the Crown Prince, Will's older brother, dies in a car crash.
It's, I guess, kind of foreshadowed a bit earlier in the season because he drives Will to school on his first day, and it's quite like fast and reckless, and the camera is a bit kind of like all over the place. But I was still really like shocked at this point in the show.
Yeah, and you know, obviously at this point, Will and Simon's relationship has been going really well, but then that is totally unsettled by the fact that Will is no longer the spare, he's now first in line. And up to that point, the show had been critiquing the wealth disparity in Swedish society more generally, really kind of showing how the networks of aristocrats that reinforced that status quo are cemented from childhood in schools just like this, and how there is this secret society of very wealthy kids with links to the royal family who all swear this very dramatic oath to protect each other. But after Eric's death, that critique moves to the monarchy itself.
And this is kind of because as the new crown prince, Wilhelm must be totally beyond reproach. And it's made very explicit that this means not getting caught doing anything bad. It doesn't mean not doing anything that is perceived as bad. It just means not getting caught.
But then evil August films him and Simon in bed together and leaks it online after Will reveals to the other kids that August is broke, that his family are out of money.
I mean, we say they're out of money. It's just because he refuses to sell some of his many lands and houses and stuff to pay for his school fees. He's not broke in the way that normal people can be broke.
But it's such a heartbreaking situation for Will because it just really highlights the emotional cruelty of an institution like a monarchy, especially for a literal child.
Yeah. And the Queen is played as such a massive bitch in this show.
Yeah, she's so manipulative. Like, the show very strongly implies that Will is too kind and that his kind of generous nature will find it very hard to adapt to being next in line to the throne.
And they really show this through the way Will treats August. Like, even though they've been at odds for a while and they had this big blow up where Will exposed his financial situation, Will arranges to have August's school fees paid, the ones that he's been stressing about so much, even though they're not on good terms. And he also doesn't make a big deal about, like, telling him that he's done this and trying to make him feel like he owes him anything. And then, like, on the flip side, you have the Queen, who is all about hoarding information and using money to control August. And, like, she's so cold, like, absolutely ice cold. And you sort of wonder, how could Will either come from this family or survive in this family?
Yeah, and the most evil thing I think she does is forcing Will to deny that it's him in the video with Simon. Because it's obvious that it's Simon in it, you can see his face. And although Simon is already out as gay, it's so agonizing to see Will publicly denying their relationship. And like, even though he's under pressure from his mother, it's obviously his decision and it's like a shitty decision that he makes, but it's so upsetting seeing poor sweet Simon having to endure being thrown to the wolves with no support.
Yeah, no protection whatsoever. And yeah, like, we were so invested in this relationship because they work so well together. So to see him deny the relationship felt like having my heart cut out.
It was awful. I was rooting for them so much. They have such a nice bond, and even though they're quite different, they have great chemistry. They're so sweet together. I think as well, like, the way they've cast the show, they look so much more like kids than any other teen show.
Yeah.
Like, they actually have, like, the bodies of normal 15, 16-year-olds. They have skin problems.
Yeah.
They have greasy hair. Like, you know, they're not these, like, super buff Riverdale teens, basically.
And it means that, like, while, like you said, Wilhelm's decision is his own and it's a shitty one, you're also like, oh, this is a child making this decision. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you're able to forgive him that, especially because you're also seeing what his mother is like and kind of the orders he's getting and, you know, what he's being told to expect for the rest of his life.
And it's so gross that a 16-year-old kid has to, like, go on TV and talk about a sexually explicit video of himself.
Yeah. I mean, we also find out that the Queen has known all along that it was August that released this video, but she was protecting him. You know, protecting someone who has, like, distributed a video of children having sex. Let's just put that out there. Like, really not a good look for any member of any royal family, or in fact anybody in the world, obviously. But, like, she is such a villain, and, like, I mean, we've talked about how much we love the show a lot, but I think in particular what I loved about it is that I do think it's quite rare that you would find something so explicitly anti-monarchist about the British royals.
I certainly never have.
Yeah, and I mean, this monarchy is, like, similar enough to the British royals that we can recognise, like, how it works and, you know, the heir and spare situation and all of these stories. But it's great to see something that goes so hard against the monarchy.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're not familiar with the real Swedish royal family. This fictional royal family does seem quite different to them. So I wonder if you're, like, a Swedish viewer, what do you make of this? Because the Queen is, as we said, not redeemed in any way.
Yeah. Actually, if we have any listeners in Sweden, would be really interested to get your thoughts on this. But yeah, I liked as well that it wasn't just, you know, taking aim at the monarchy in isolation, but it also looked at the kind of socio-economic class structure of Sweden and of, you know, any country really that has a monarchy like this. It's not just about the amount of money that you pay them from your taxes every year. It's about the way that institution has organised the entire country in a way that is totally unfair for the vast majority of the people in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I loved that almost as much as I loved the beautiful romance.
I know. I thought they just did such a great job of telling this story and, you know, all of that very angsty teen yearning. And then after Will denies it's him in the video, how Simon is so devastated and that Will wants to keep seeing him in secret, but Simon doesn't want to be a secret. And you just, you know, you cry, you feel so much.
And I really respected Simon at that point as well, because, I mean, as an adult, you know, I can look at that and be like, of course you don't want to be someone's, like, secret boyfriend or whatever. But, you know, as a child, I could imagine being like, oh, but I really want to be with this person, so I guess I'll put up with it. But I was like, this guy has, you know, such a wise head on his shoulders. He knows his own worth. And I found that, like, a great quality to have in someone who is still very much portrayed as a child.
Yeah, especially because Simon is so isolated at the school that it would be easy for him to just say yes to whatever Will's conditions are because he doesn't really have anyone else to rely on, including his own fucking sister.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the other really big shocking moment, is that Simon's sister sees August leak the video of the two of them together, but Rather than telling Simon that she knows who did it, she goes to August and makes a deal with him that he can help her become a full boarder and be accepted by all the rich kids in school as long as she continues to cover for him.
And it's so sad because up until then, like, her main friend Felice, who, like, at the beginning you think is going to be, like, just as stuck up and as much of an asshole as August, she's actually, like, pretty sound and, you know, not as bad as a lot of the people at this school. So you kind of thought that, like, oh, she's, like, friends with someone who's nice, and, like, then to have her do this kind of 180, my jaw was on the floor.
Felice also does some great detective work when she also figures out that August has sent the video by noticing a defect in the video quality. Yeah. I loved that bit. I also thought they did a great job telling the story of Felice and her parents and the pressure that her mother puts on her to lose weight and look and dress a certain way, which was really horrible to watch, but I feel like is very true to the experience of lots of women, probably regardless of their class, but especially in that kind of social circle.
And, like, the pressure from her mum to, like, get with Will as well. Because, like...
Oh, Carol Middleton. Yeah, we want to talk about that.
Yeah, because, I mean, it seems at first in the show that she has this big crush on Will, but it becomes kind of clear towards the end that a lot of that is due to her mother's pressure to get a closer tie to the royal family. And, yeah, real Carol Middleton vibes. Yeah,
that was a great little angle in the story.
Yeah.
We enjoy that a lot. But I just thought it was such a great show. You know, it combined sort of all the things that we like in terms of romance and anti-monarchism. And, you know, sort of gossipy, soapy, elite school drama.
Yeah, like, we love a teen drama show. But I did think that the drama in this was pretty grounded in stuff that we know to be true, i.e. that monarchies are really homophobic and elite schools are designed to fuck over everyone else.
Unfortunately, they haven't announced a second season yet, but I think they will, because I think this was a really popular show.
Yeah, and I think if they do a second season, I'm pretty sure that given that steely gaze that Wilhelm had out of the car window at the close of season 1, he's going to be raising merry hell as a member of the royal family.
Yes, because it ended at Christmas with Will publicly giving Simon a hug in front of everyone at school after us being led to believe he had sort of snubbed him. So that was a sort of ambiguous ending, but I'm going to be hopeful. Because I want our boys to be together.
I know, so do I.
So, yeah, we've spoiled the whole show, but if you haven't seen it, we recommend going back and watching it.
I mean, it's just done so well that even if you know everything that happens, you'd still enjoy it, I think.
I think that's about it for today, though. Thank you so much for listening, if you are still with us.
Yeah, this bumper episode.
We will be back. Oh, we have our tickets to see the Kristen Stewart Diana movie.
Oh, yeah, very, very, very excited about that.
I don't know if that'll be our next episode or the one after it, but the reviews for it have been so good that I just cannot fucking wait to see it.
Oh, it's like everything that we love in one, so...
It does seem like in general, though, like royal news is sort of in a scary place right now for the royal family, so it's an exciting time to be an anti-monarchist.
Very, very exciting. And there's also like constantly new stuff coming out because both the financial stuff with Charles and the legal stuff with Andrew are so complicated, and there's constantly new details coming out. So we will try and keep abreast of all of that and report back in the next episode.
We hope you'll come back and join us. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
And I couldn't explain it if I hadn't had a hint of fighting my own journey through my own compass of my own heart.